up, Kryptonians? As you guys know, Swamp Thing ended its first and probably last season a few weeks ago. It started in May, I think May 31st was the date. And it carried on for the next month or so. It only had 10 episodes, and I am a little bit late to the party in terms of reviewing it. By the way, this review is going to contain spoilers. I'm not going to be able to talk about all the things that I want to talk about in the show without having spoilers, so if you for some reason have not gotten caught up on Swamp Thing, I would advise you to step away from this video because I am going to be talking in depth about this thing. And I'm actually kind of glad that it took me so long to get around to reviewing this show because I did want to collect my thoughts. I don't know if you guys know this, I've said this in previous videos, I don't plan out my thoughts when I do a video. Normally I'm very kind of ad-libbing with the shit, like it's a lot of improvisation. I don't write down scripts, I don't write down what I'm gonna say. Like I kind of know what I want to say, but I don't know how I'm gonna say it. But for a show like this, I wanted to take the extra time, I wanted to rewatch it, so I took notes. I wanted to make sure I was prepared to come up here and tell you on camera that Swamp Thing for DC Universe is one of the best things that DC has ever done. This of course is another live action series that was released on the DC streaming service DC Universe, and this is a show that had 13 episodes, then it got cut to 10 episodes, and it got canceled basically after its first week. There's been a lot of petition and a lot of rallying online about Save Swamp Thing, and I am definitely part of Save Swamp Thing movement because this show is amazing, like start to finish. Almost everything about it I am in love with. Before I go any further, I have to touch on how spectacular the production design, the production value of the show is, the cinematography, everything about the way that this show looks and feels is spectacular. There are times where I was watching the show and it definitely felt like a movie, or like the stuff in the show could be considered on a movie budget or on a movie set somewhere. It's basically the highest compliment that you can give to a TV show, is that the TV show makes you feel like you're watching a movie at times. Everything about this show screams horror. This is not a superhero show in the sense, I mean, yes, technically Swamp Thing is a superhero from the comics-ish. This is a show that's not necessarily trying to be a superhero show. It's a lot of things, but first and foremost, it is a horror show. Even the action sequences in the show, like there's a scene in the finale where Swamp Thing has to take out a group of soldiers that have come into the swamp looking for him. And in this scene, they approach the action as if they would approach a horror movie. Like there's a bunch of really brutal and surprising things. Like he's basically stalking his prey in this scene. Same thing with this other scene earlier in the season involving Blue Devil, where he has to save Abby and her friend from some situation that they've got themselves into. They approach this action scene as if they were shooting a horror movie. And it's not surprising because Lynn Wiseman and James Wan are two of the executive producers on the show. Both of those guys have an extensive history in horror, extensive background, if you will, so it's not really surprising that the show nailed all the supernatural and horror elements so well. Getting back to the cinematography of the show, this was filmed on location in North Carolina, and they definitely brought the swamp to life in a way that I think they needed to for a show like this. It's dirty, it's filthy, it's grimy, definitely kind of contained, but it's also like a really big thing. Everything about the swamp just looked and felt as creepy as it should have felt for the vibe that they were going for in this show. It smelled bad. I mean, okay, technically, I can't know how bad the swamp smelled. Ever see cinematography that's so good for a TV or a movie or something like that, where you just feel like you can smell the shit through the screen? Am I like literally the only person that that's ever happened to? Like I'm the only person that ever smells the cinematography? Okay, I'm just weird. The cinematography for Lord of the Rings is god tier. You know what Lord of the Rings still smells like to this day to me? It smells like elf pubes and hobbit weed. I mean, come on, that just smells like greatness there. You can't just smell it when you watch Fellowship of the Ring. I can't just smell it when you watch that trilogy. Bottom line is the production value, the production design, and the cinematography all get high marks for me. This also applies to Swamp Thing himself, played by Andy Bean. Okay, Andy Bean plays Alec Holland. Alec Holland is the persona behind Swamp Thing, but Swamp Thing himself, I think, is played by Derek Mears. It didn't use a lot of CGI for Swamp Thing. In fact, Derek Mears wore a full bodysuit, and the prosthetics for the suit and the way that it looked and felt, it was just, oh my god, it's amazing. I love everything about the way that Swamp Thing looked in the show. He was big, he was hulking, he was massive, he was intimidating. I read a little bit of Swamp Thing from the comics, and I think that Alan Moore and a lot of his other creators and writers would agree that this is the way that Swamp Thing should be brought to the screen. Whether it's like TV or movie, this is the way that Swamp Thing should look and feel. A large portion of his story in this season, it revolves around Alec Holland trying to rediscover his humanity, and then there's also kind of a tragic romance. There's kind of a romance between him and Abby at the beginning, and then he dies, but then he turns into Swamp Thing, kind of. Throughout the show, you definitely feel like this grab and pull between them, like you feel like they're trying to find their way back to each other. There's a great episode later on in the season, sprinkles like pheromone dust in her eyes or something. He's able to show her what he actually wants to be, which is what he used to be, which is human. And she obviously, she sees what she wants to see, so she sees him as human. It did get beautifully awkward at the end of that episode because she does give him a kiss, and it kind of made me wonder if they were going to go the extra mile and actually have like a small little sex scene between Swamp Thing and her, and if I was going to be comfortable watching a gigantic green thing having sex with, I don't know why my mind goes to these places, but I'm just saying it would have been kind of interesting to see someone get screwed by a tree branch on camera. It's just, I'm not sure how that would have worked exactly, but hey, you would have watched too. The cinematic quality of the show also extends to all of the performances and the music in the show. The performances in particular I want to talk about. Everybody in the show does such a great job. Crystal Reed was amazing as Abby. She's like the main character basically in the show, or the main character alongside Swamp Thing. She was great. Will Patton was also in the show. He was great. He's kind of a slime ball. He's the business guy of this town, Murray, that they're in, where there's this big disease that's contracted. It's kind of the whole reason why Abby came back to this swamp place in the first place. What I love about the character work in the show is how everybody in the show has an emotional attachment. Everybody in the show has emotional stakes for why they're there and what they're doing. Okay, like I said, Avery, he's kind of a scumbag, but you at least kind of understand why he is the way he is. Like, they do delve into his complicated history with his father. There's an episode later on in the season after he survives people trying to kill him, kind of walking around, and then he goes through these weird visions because he's dying, and you do get a little bit of a sense of why his father did what he did to him and how that affected him as an adult now. Every character in the show, including Avery's wife, played, what's her name again? It's played by Virginia Madsen. I forget I think her name's Marie or something like that. Even Marie, like Marie has huge issues with Abby when she first comes back to this town, but you understand why she feels the way she feels. That's why you feel like when characters make decisions, it's not just because the writers have no idea how to get people from point A to point B. It's also because you feel like they're making decisions that make sense for their characters. And that to me is the show of great character building and great story writing. There's a lot of really creepy and disturbing imagery in the show. One of the more creepy moments that stand out to me, there's an episode early on that involves the rot, which is basically this corpse that got pulled apart and put back together, and then there's a whole bunch of gnats and maggots and stuff, and it's really disgusting stuff. The thing that creeped me out the most was this episode where there's this virus that got passed from some body like deep in the swamp, and then they carry it back to town, and then this guy thinks he's seeing things. He sees like a snake on his arm, starts stabbing the hell out of his arm, and then he basically puts his arm in a disposal and gets it cut off, and he ends up dying. I had chills throughout that entire scenario. Granted, if it was me, since I don't do snakes, I'd have just lit my entire arm on fire and called it a day. On the stretch of the season, I do feel like there are scenes missing, there are episodes missing, there are things that could have been delved into, things that could have been fleshed out a little bit more. The entire end of the season felt like a rush, but I definitely feel like they could have stuck the landing in some areas. It still ends off in a pretty perfect place, honestly. Considering the fact that it went from 13 to 10, and considering the fact that it was canceled after its first week, I thought they ended it about as well as they could have. The thing that didn't really work for me in the season was kind of the backdoor pilot for Blue Devil. Like, Blue Devil's a very fascinating character in the comics. I felt like his storyline was kind of clunky when you put it alongside the narrative. Like, it didn't really work for me, and at times it kind of messed up some of the pacing and the flow of some of the later episodes. Great teases for season 2 that we're never gonna get, like Floronic Man. Floronic Man makes an appearance in a post-credit scene. There's this strange darkness that serves as a subplot, like this darkness in the swamp. Like, throughout the entire season, it gets brought up, it gets talked about, and it's kind of teased for next season, but they never really go there with this show. There's so many great moments and great episodes throughout the season that I'm not even mentioning that I feel like most people, if they watch the show, are gonna get hooked into. And if you love horror, this is the kind of show that you want to see. Great music. I love Swamp Thing's theme. That thing just like, I love that shit. Overall, I would give this show actually a 4.5 out of 5 supers. I think it's a terrific show. I'm very sad, very upset that this show got canceled. Definitely deserve more Swamp Thing, but we'll see how it happens. We'll see what turns up in the future. Those are my thoughts on Swamp Thing. Sorry I'm so late with it. Tell me what your favorite moments from the season, favorite episodes are. Put that in the comment section below. Like and subscribe to the Superfan Show, and as always, if you like what you see, tell me how you feel, and stay tuned to hear more from the Man of Steel. Peace.